This is Federalist 48, Part 3. We'll start with paragraph 5. In a government where numerous and extensive prerogatives are placed in the hands of an hereditary monarch, the executive department is very justly regarded as the source of danger, and watched with all the jealousy which a zeal for liberty ought to inspire. In a democracy where a multitude of people exercise in person the legislative functions and are continually exposed by their incapacity for regular deliberation and concerted measures to the ambitious intrigues of their executive magistrates, tyranny may well be apprehended on some favorable emergency to start up in the same quarter. But in a representative republic where the executive magistracy is carefully limited, representative republic like ours says this is what's going to happen in our system. But in a representative republic where the executive magistracy is carefully limited, both in the extent and the duration of its power, and where the legislative power is exercised by an assembly which is inspired by a supposed influence over the people with an intrepid confidence in its own strength, which is sufficiently numerous to feel all the passions which actuate a multitude, yet not so numerous as to be incapable of pursuing the objects of its passions by means which reason prescribes. It is against the enterprising ambition of this department that people ought to indulge all their jealousy and exhaust all their precautions. So just like we talked about, in our system, he says, it's not the governors or the president that you need to so much worry about. In our federal system, it is going to be the legislature that might very well overstep its bounds. The legislative department derives a superiority in our governments from other circumstances, its constitutional power being at once more extensive and less susceptible of precise limits. It can, with the greater facility, mask, under complicated and indirect measures, the encroachments which it makes on the coordinate departments. It is not unfrequently a question of real nicety in legislative bodies whether the operation of a particular measure will or will not extend beyond the legislative sphere. On the other side, the executive power being restrained within a narrower compass and being more simple in its nature, and the judiciary being described by landmarks still less uncertain, projects of usurpation by either of these departments would immediately betray and defeat themselves. Nor is this all, as the legislative department alone has access to the pockets of the people. Okay, because it's the legislature that decides how much and where to spend the money. So he says it has access to people. This is why an unrestrained legislature becomes extremely dangerous in our system. Okay, I'll read that again. As the legislative department alone has access to the pockets of the people and has in some constitutions full discretion and in all a prevailing influence over the pecuniary rewards of those who fill the other departments, a dependence is thus created in the latter, which gives still greater facility to encroachments of the former. So The legislature controls the money, and with the control of money, it can tell others that work in the government, hey, your salary, your job is in my hands. If you don't follow what I say, even if it's overstepping my bounds, then you might not have your job, your salary might be reduced. So it's got this very, very influential tool in its hands. The next paragraph, I have appealed to our experience for the truth of what I advance on this subject. See, it's basing everything he's saying on the experience that we've had. Were it necessary to verify this experience by particular proofs, they might be multiplied without end. There are so many examples that I can give you. I might collect vouchers in abundance from the records and archives of every state in the Union, but as a more concise and at the same time equally satisfactory evidence, I will refer to the example of 2 states, attested by 2 unexceptionable authorities. So he says, I can just go down the list, tell you why I'm saying that the legislature has abused its powers. I can go down the list, 13 states, and name all of them. But I know that will be tiring, that will take time. You all know some of it. So let me just focus on 2 of the states, and the source that we go to are people, it says, that are unexceptionable. These are people that can be totally trusted to be knowledgeable and to be telling us the truth. The next paragraph, the first example is that of Virginia, state which, as we have seen, has expressly declared in its constitution that the 3 great departments ought not to be intermixed. The authority in support of it is Mr. Jefferson, who, besides his other advantages for remarking the operation of the government, was himself the chief magistrate of it. So we're going to see what Jefferson has to say. He was the governor of Virginia at the time. He's really familiar with what was going on in Virginia. In order to convey fully the ideas with which his experience had impressed him on this subject, it will be necessary to quote a passage of some length from his very interesting Notes on the State of Virginia, page 195. Jefferson got a request from a French official to write about history of Virginia, the government of Virginia, and it's considered, if we want to call it a book, it's considered the only book that Thomas Jefferson has written, and he talks about everything in Virginia. So he says, let me just go ahead and quote what Jefferson says about his own state. He says, I'm going to give you a long quote, a long quotation, so it might be good for us to read the whole thing and reflect on it. But what I'll do is I'll stop here, and I will continue in the next video from the beginning of this quotation, and this will give us more time to talk about it. But the whole idea is for you to remember that Publius, Madison, Hamilton, John Jay, they look at experience, they look at history. They know their theories, they know what political theorists have said, but they say we got to look at not only other people's histories and experiences, but our own history. So he says, every time we're going to tell you why we did this in writing this Constitution, we have experiences, we have other people's experiences, people that we trust, their experiences to refer to and look at. So that because of that, we have devised a wonderful Constitution for you. So I'll stop here and we'll continue in the next video.